Alright guys, this is going to be part one of a self-interview so you guys can sort of get to know me better. This is my father Glenn, who's going to be conducting said interview. So,
Hi there, guys.
go ahead.
Alrighty, here's the dead interview. First question, how did you get started in martial arts?
Okay, well, you know this because we actually began together, albeit briefly. Started with karate, Seijukan, I think it was called, under Richard Dixon. And he was I see him as like a really good motivator.
Indeed.
Yeah. There were things that I think traditional karateka might have not appreciated, you know, like all the terms were in English except for the names of the kata and stuff like that. But he was very good at keeping me focused anyway, on continuing with the activity despite the physical hardships that came with it, you know.
Yes.
When you've already done an hour of karate and he's like, lower in the horse stance.
Yes.
Like, yes, sensei.
But he wasn't harsh about it.
Right. I mean, I don't mean this to sound derogatory, but he was a good cheerleader, I think.
Yeah. And interested in his students.
Yeah.
And how they were progressing.
Yeah.
Even old people like me. Because I didn't start until when I was 50-something when I really got into it.
Yeah.
So it was a challenge.
Yeah. But he was good at keeping us focused, and eventually got my black belt. Hooray. And that was how I got started. Always had an interest, though. You know, I'd go to the library and check out all the books on karate and jiu-jitsu and boxing and all that. So.
All right, number 2. What's the difference between fighting and self-defense?
Fighting is what happens when self-defense goes wrong. I've heard that expression. Basically, fighting is something that you agree to do. Self-defense is something that, well, to quote fellow YouTuber Ramsey Dewey, it's a legal term for starters.
Yeah.
And it's something that you need to be able to legally justify, you know, your actions, as opposed to, again, a fight, which is, you know, are you looking at me? You want to take this outside? Okay, that's mutual combat. Self-defense is, you know, you're getting in your car and suddenly somebody sticks a gun in your ribs.
Right.
You know, and like, how do I respond to that? And sometimes you do it without conflict, and sometimes you do it with conflict. You know, somebody wants your car, give them your car. You know, fine. Except if your kid's in your car, maybe that changes things.
Yeah.
So, difference between fighting and self-defense. Again, fighting is something that you agree to for the most part. Self-defense is something that you're trying to prevent something bad from happening to you, basically.
Well, does everybody have a right to self-defense?
Short answer is yes.
Okay.
What are you thinking?
I'm thinking, it seems to me from Stone Age on up, we try to defend ourselves from harm. So legally and, I don't know, morally, we have a right to defend ourselves from somebody who wants to do harm to us.
Right.
Alrighty. Oh, geez. What role do handguns play in self-defense?
Yeah, I picked this for you. I would say if someone is living in a country where handguns are legal, that they should at least consider using them for self-defense if that's a priority. My issue is that I think a lot of people will get a handgun and think like, okay, job's done. I now own a gun. I think that if someone, I think that for self-defense, everyone should understand unarmed combat. I think if you own a handgun, that's doubly important because there's an expression that I heard from he was a defensive tactics instructor. And the expression was, if I have a gun and our bodies are touching, we have a gun.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, that changes the paradigm a little bit. So people who own handguns and choose to use them for self-defense, first of all, should try to get as much training with them as possible. I know you've certified people for concealed carry, and you say sometimes it's clear that this is the first time they've even loaded their weapon.
Yes.
I'm sure that that's the exception more than the rule, but, any number greater than zero scares me. Yeah.
There have been several, and when I did do that, I encouraged them greatly to join the club and get more training.
Yeah.
Because you have to know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, you have to be trained. But there's the other obligation to know when to use a handgun.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also the obligation to understand what will happen after you use a handgun.
Yeah.
It's not like you see on the movies, bang, and it's over.
Right.
When the police come, they might arrest you.
Yeah.
And even though you might get legally off because it was self-defense, you will probably be put in handcuffs and taken down to the station. You need to understand that.
Right.
And a lot of people don't. Like you say, they just buy a handgun, stick it in the drawer and say, okay,
yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to it than just that.
Right. So basically education is key, and I think both of us and many other people would like to see more education when it comes to the use of handguns and, the before and after the conflict. That's important for self-defense in general.
Yes.
If I smash somebody's teeth in with my elbow, maybe I need to apply first aid to them depending on the circumstances, And I also need to be able to articulate why I decided to take that action in a court of law.
Yeah. And, for my part, I would also include long guns.
Okay.
Because if you think of it in home defense,
mm-hmm.
if somebody's breaking into your house, you may have a long gun and not a handgun. And it's still the same thing. If you have one, you still need to know how to use it and how it works.
Yeah.
So, alrighty then. Can you learn martial arts from books and videos?
It's always better to have a good instructor in person, especially if you can get one-on-one training. But if you couldn't, why would these things even exist?
Yeah.
And they have for centuries, both in Eastern and Western martial arts. You can learn something. You need to apply it. You need to go out and practice.
Right.
Eventually moving on to something like sparring is key.
Yeah.
Because that opens up problem solving. Why am I having trouble landing this punch or kick or weapon strike? Okay, and I need to figure out how my opponent is going to react and things like that. So.
And different opponents react in different ways.
Yeah. Which is one of the reasons I'm a big fan of cross-train. Go train with everybody you can.
Yeah.
First of all, it's like a fun bonding experience, but going back to the question, yes, you can. It's not as good as a one-on-one instructor. I think books are good for understanding principles, and videos are better for seeing actions in motion.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can better understand how the actual movement works.
And it would be nice if you could slow that motion down.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I watch something and I'm going, how do you do that?
Yeah.
But
the good news is most instructionals do that.
Awesome. All righty. All right. Why did you start your channel?
The short answer is to get information out there. There have been videos. Okay, Bill Superfoot Wallace did an interview with the Karate Nerd where he talked about UFC 1. And even as I was watching the video, I had to pause it and go back through my own resources and through interviews I've seen with other people and through the event itself. Mr. Wallace is remembering things not quite as they happened. And that is, I've met the man on 2 occasions. He's a very charming human being. I got nothing against him. But this is bad information, and this is not the only piece of bad information that's been put out there. So ultimately with my channel, I hope to go through and clear up some of that information. A lot of what I'm doing with sharing the book reviews is, to share with my audience, like, hey, this might be something you'd be interested in getting. It's also to sort of establish that I know all this stuff. To establish the fact that I cast a broad net when it comes to martial arts, and I just avidly absorb the information that's contained therein. And so yeah, just getting information out there, and I hope that has helped people to maybe get pointed in the right direction when it comes to, what resources should I look into as far as martial arts go.
Can I brag as a dad?
Okay.
Joe has a sense of, I must learn everything about everything in the world. And it must be factual. It can't be made up. If I can't find the facts, then I'm going to dig harder and harder until I do find the facts. So he does research extremely well, and sometimes it takes him a long time, but he'll find out the answer. The other thing that has always amazed me about Joe is how he is able to connect different facts that seem random into one thing. And I think that's one of his gifts. He one of the things he likes to do is look at different katas, and he says, oh, this kata in this martial arts is pretty good, pretty similar to this kata in this other martial arts, so aren't they the same? And he does things like that, but he's really good. So,
thank you.
I had to say that.
I'm humbled.
What do you hope to do with your channel in the future?
I'd like to do more video essays. The book reviews are always going to be part of what I do. My long-term plan had always been to do a book review every other video, and I'd like to get into things like profiling different martial arts styles, different weapons, different martial artists. Again, going in and doing a little bit of myth busting. There are people who I respect an awful lot who have said some things that I think are questionable, and I'm not sure there's any evidence to back it up. And I'd like to explore that further. At this point, I am going through my illness, going through treatment. So a lot of the channel is sort of taken a back seat to that. But in the future, yeah, I hope to to really get into more video essays and explore things beyond simply the book reviews.
Awesome.
Right.
I think you'll do that.
Okay. Last question?
That's the one.
Okay.
So unless you have any other thing on top of your head.
No.
Okay.
All right, guys. Appreciate you watching, and we'll be back later. Bye.